Welcome to another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts. I'm Dr. Joe Hamlett, and alongside me is the other co-host, Dr. Dave Peltz. How you doing, Dr. Dave?
Most excellent there, Dr. Joe. You were going to say my what? My what?
I was going to say my esteemed colleague, like I
There, okay,
always say.
thank you. There we go.
Well, as you can see, we're off to a good start already. Excited about being here. So thank you all for tuning in. If you've been following along on the journey with us, thank you. I forgot to even mention it. This is the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. And this is your personal, professional, and career development podcast. And again, we want to help you along with your journey as well as helping ourselves on our own journeys because we're still on our journey too. So thanks for tuning in again. And for those that are new, thanks for maybe listening in for your first time or viewing this podcast. With that, like in our normal fashion, one of us introduces the topic and the other gets us started. So kind of a long-winded intro, but here we go. And so the topic is actually going to be kind of a mouthful as well.
Yeah.
So I'm going to look out to the side here so I can make sure I get this correct. So the topic today is, are you equipped to see the value in others? So Dr. Dave, how are you going to start us off with that?
Wow. Thank you for getting that out without stammering and stuttering because I would have messed it all up. I'm sure it's a lot of words. So, are you equipped to see the value in others? That is a great question, and we're hoping this one's going to get some good traction this week. Um, it's based upon a lot of our personal and professional experiences. We've seen in our professional careers. We've even witnessed it and discussed it with other people who are observing the same thing. And what we mean by this question is it's a little bit more pointed towards the professional side because of what's happened probably in the last 6 or 8 years. There's been kind of a different trend with the way people are evaluated for promotions, for job interviews, casual meetings, maybe like a pre-screen or something like that. And these individuals are very typically highly qualified individuals that are just being overlooked and
Right.
bypassed. Even after being told, well, if you meet this criteria, ABC 1, 2, 3, then you're set up for the job and the promotion. And then they do all this work, they invest all this time and energy and effort to get certifications, education, additional experience, only to be
Right.
told, and here's the kicker, to be told, yeah, but you don't have this. And
Right.
this and that and the air quotes of this is that needle in the haystack that you were never told about, or you were never informed about, or it's just a one-off that totally dismisses all your expertise and qualifications for what not having one small item. And
Right.
so that's what we're talking about when we talk when we pose the question, are you equipped to see the value in others? It's really directed at those that are making those decisions. They're looking at the resumes, they're looking at the cover letters, they're doing first, second, potentially third, fourth, fifth, and sixth interviews. They're the recruiters, they're the HR personnel, they're the even the hiring managers. You know, they're looking for something so pinpoint and so obscure sometimes that it just totally dismisses all the rest of your credibility and qualifications, regardless.
Yeah.
So that's really where we're going with this one. It's a little bit different direction we're used to, but in the past couple of weeks, we've had several people approach us and ask us, "What the heck? How come
Right.
what can I do to overcome that?" You know, and so that's where we're at. We're throwing that question out there. What the heck? One
Right.
one little needle out of all the other broomsticks and tools in your toolbox. There's this one little tiny needle that you're missing, and that disqualifies you from everything. So,
Like you said, Dave, we've had this conversation with many people, especially in recent weeks. But it is a common question.
mhm.
I've got all these credentials, I've done all these things, but then when I sit in front of an interviewer or someone who's reviewing my resume, sometimes it's asked, you have all these things, but you don't have this experience or this thing for this particular thing. So it is kind of discouraging for people that have gone above and beyond and did those things that again that they thought were the right things. They look at a or they look at a job description or application, and they're like, "Well, I have all these things, or I have something equivalent to it. So why wouldn't I be considered?" And you mentioned all these things. Yeah, you've got A, B, C, you've got one, two, three. You've done all these things that supposedly is required of this position or to move forward. But I'm also going to challenge the fact that the person who has all these things, I think it's also up to them to understand the value in what they have as well,
Oh,
to
absolutely.
to be able to articulate that to others.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a challenge as well, because we go in there. I'm guilty of it as well. I go in there with all of this experience, and sometimes I can't articulate it if they ask me a question and then I can't articulate how what I've done in the past or my experience or my education, how that relates to being able to respond to that question they ask me. So
Right.
it is, the onus is still on us as well to be able to articulate that. So that's a challenge. And I
Mhm.
think again, a lot of times we go in there fully loaded, we think, with all this experience, all this education, all these certifications, and we think that our resume is going to speak for itself, or our credentials are going to speak for ourselves itself. And a lot of times it still takes some articulation to help the
Mhm.
person on the other side of that screening process or interview, whatever it is, to help them understand how this relates to what you see in my resume, my experience,
Mhm.
my background can transform into what you're looking for. So I
Mhm.
think that that's a challenge as well.
Yes.
With us, with those credentials, with that qualification, being able to share how we're going to help you with your problem. So I think
Mhm.
that's a challenge as well. So not just to call out the
Right, right, right.
people on
Yeah.
the other side, but again, it's still on us too to be able to do that. And I know I've been in interviews where I haven't been able to do that properly
Yeah.
because you get so caught up in uh, you're trying to answer the question the way you think they want it to be answered.
Mhm.
So that starts to throw your mind into a spin of, okay, am I going to say this right? Or are they going to receive it right? So it takes that part of it as well for us to be able to articulate clearly what we bring to the table.
Sure.
So
Sure. And I'm still going to play the other side of
no,
the
absolutely.
conversation a little bit, because what about those individuals who can articulate their
You're
experience
right.
and
Yeah.
translate it and put it in the terms that the people on the other side, whether they're screening it, whether they're reviewing it, whether they're
Right.
evaluating it, or whether you're actually in the interview, whether they're actually seeing what that value is? Can they
Right.
actually, do they actually, can they actually understand? And I know that's kind of
Right.
harsh, but can they actually understand what you bring? And we've had this conversation with several colleagues, and not just doctors that ask the question, how can they not see the value?
Right.
It's right there. I'm sitting in the interview, or how can it not even get past the screening stage?
Right.
These individuals have, they've got beautiful resumes, they're articulate, they meet all the format and function, and um, they meet the minimum qualifications. They even meet the desired
Right.
qualifications,
Right.
and they can't even get an interview. It's like, so where does that go? And I've heard and read and researched many different reasons. Oh, well, it's because they didn't follow the right format, or the
Right.
order was too long, or one of my favorites is resume bloat.
Right.
You have too much experience. It's like, and we've said this before. How can an airline pilot have too much experience? How can a quarterback have too much experience? If they're
Right.
successful, and it's like, how how do we get around people negating and mitigating and minimizing our experience? And we've been asked this several times. How can a person have done that much? Well,
Right. Yes. Yes.
overachievers typically do that
Right.
much. They don't want to sit still. They're hard driving. They're
Yep.
ground pounders, and yes, believe it or not, there are people with that much experience,
Yep.
and then when it comes down to it, it's like, okay, but you have manufacturing in tin cans, but you don't have manufacturing experience with aluminum cans.
Right.
And it's
Right.
like, or you have experience with tin cans and not aluminum cans. And it's like, what I mean, yeah, yeah, I'm positive on a metallurgical level, there is a significant difference.
Right.
However, that does translate,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know?
I just want to touch on the overachievers. You
Mhm,
mentioned them, and it's funny you say that because just last week have lunch with a gentleman, and he said this is exactly what he said. He said, I've achieved a lot of things, and I have seen, he's on LinkedIn. He's got things showing up every week that he's completed. And he said, I'll go a day, 2 days, 24, 48 hours, and I'll be excited about that. And then he said, I'm already putting that on the shelf and looking for the next thing.
mhm,
Because to your point, yeah, overachievers are going to continue to, do something to
mhm,
move them forward, to elevate them, to, get them excited.
mhm,
And he was a perfect example of that. Just saying, I'm going to accept this and I'm going to be happy about it for about 2 days, and then I'm moving on to the next thing.
mhm,
So, like you said, a lot of people that sit there and look at your resume and say, "Well, how could they have done that?" And we talked about it during that same conversation. It really comes down to how bad do you want to do things. I mean, how
mhm,
much are you willing to sacrifice? How much time are you willing to spend?
mhm,
And how disciplined are you going to be to accomplish it?
mhm,
And that's what he said. He passed on to his kids, that you can achieve anything if you're disciplined, if you're willing to sacrifice, if you're willing to commit to those things, then you can achieve it. And
mhm,
so that's it. It's that overachiever that's going to continue to push themselves forward, and a lot of times don't need any outside, stimulation or
no,
outside, interaction to for them to move forward. So
yeah,
a lot of times their resumes are, like you said, may appear bloated, but it's an actuality. They've
mhm,
actually completed those things or done
mhm,
those tasks, or have all those certifications that they
mhm,
have listed there. So like you say, when people look at your resume and they're like, well, how can they have done all these things?
mhm,
They were really, intentional about
mhm.
achieving these things, and
Yeah, they're
so they
intrinsically
carved
that
out their
a
time.
high intrinsic motivation.
Absolutely.
It's just ingrained in them to just
Yep.
go above and beyond.
Yeah,
And
so
I think
it's
one of the challenges, Joe, is sometimes I believe a lot of people don't know how to supervise, manage, or lead those types of individuals.
right, right. Yeah. Yeah. Again, that's, you know, even talking to this gentleman when he talked about, I go into an interview and I show them all these things, they'll do what you said, you got all these things, but,
Mhm.
he's like, but again, I'm showing you here, demonstrating that I could do all of these things,
Mhm.
and so to I think he questions them, why wouldn't you think I could achieve this, even if I
Mhm.
have very minimal experience in what you're looking for, and you can see my credentials, wouldn't that kind of signal that maybe I could do some of these things
Right.
or learn these things? And so that was his frustration. He's like, I
Yeah.
don't know what to do, because again, I'm putting it all out on the table, everything I'm capable of, and
Yeah.
so he's frustrated at why can't they see it? I can see it, but why can't they see it? So
Right. Yeah. And I'm going to go to an example that I had um, not too long ago, a few years back. And one of my mentors that I used to work with, wonderful person, great experience, very qualified to do the job.
right.
And um, I said, sure, submit for it. And I'm looking for someone that meets what you have, and you exceed it, and that's awesome. And the person submitted their resume, and about a week later, they said that they did not meet they were declined.
Mm.
They didn't even get past the screening phase.
Right. Yeah.
And so I called up HR, and they said, and I'm going to use kind of a different example. And they said, well, this person didn't say um, trainer. And I'm like,
Mm.
what do you mean they didn't say trainer? They said, well, they said facilitator. And I'm like, you do realize that trainer, facilitator, educator, professor, teacher, are synonyms,
Right. Right.
very synonymous with one another.
Right.
And that was where the conversation stopped because that one specific word wasn't used. you know
Wow.
that this person said professor instead of trainer. It's like,
Right.
well,
Right.
in order to become a professor, there is some education involved and
Right.
to be able to be that. And usually there's some training aspects of that where that person has to do some training first, so and be pretty well proficient at it, because if you can't articulate and communicate with your students, then you're not going to be an effective trainer or educator.
Right.
So it's just examples like that and they wouldn't reconsider this person. They would not
Wow.
reconsider this person, and frustrating for that person, frustrating for me, and it's like, why? And so I started delving into this and I started researching it, and my research showed that a lot of individuals, or many individuals, don't have a broad business acumen to understand how these terms translate. So they look for that very specific word,
Right.
and over the last 4 years, 3 or 4 years, companies, it's become known now that you use the verbiage that's in that um, job description.
Right.
So you hit those keywords, but are you hitting them? Then the question is, are you hitting them enough or too much? Or
Right.
is your resume become boring because you keep saying trainer, 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 trainer instead
Right.
of facilitator, educator, to make it a little bit more palatable when someone reads it, And so, it's just interesting that, that that they lack the broad business acumen or just the experience. It's just a stepping stone to get to another place within that organization, within that HR entity, that they do the recruiting or that they do the scanning or something like that. And maybe they do have broad business acumen, but they don't understand the value that that person brings, because they're looking for that one specific thing to
Yeah.
disqualify them instead of all these other things that make them highly
Right. That
qualified.
could, and that's a good point. Because I think that's, I've sat in on a session where we talked about resumes, and that's exactly what I heard from a recruiter was they look for those key things, and one if they don't see those key things, then they move on, which is unfortunate. Like you say, it's that trainer or facilitator,
Mm-hmm.
which word or which phrase is correct, and if they
Mm-hmm.
don't see that, then they move on. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's unfortunate again that like you say, that this person could have all this wealth of experience and knowledge that, so maybe not use the word trainer, but they're an educator, they're a facilitator, all these things that they've done, and that recruiter is looking for that one particular thing, and they miss all of that other stuff surrounding that,
Yeah.
and they don't see that, so that's a immediate disqualifier, and
Mm-hmm.
again, that's unfortunate.
Mm-hmm.
Like you say, I can understand to a degree, if you've got 200 resumes that you're trying to fill a spot, and some of those resumes may have exactly facilitator, but then
Mm-hmm.
that they see that facilitator or that word trainer, and the person was a trainer for 2 months, and but
Mm-hmm.
this other person who's been facilitating for 15 years, and
Right.
so it just, what are you missing if you're
Mm-hmm.
so focused on just that one
Right.
term or that one key phrase that
Mm-hmm.
the description called for. So
Right.
that is again that frustrating piece for that person that is feel like they're qualified for that
Mm-hmm.
position, but because they didn't use the right terms or things like that, they're not even notified for initial interview or anything like that. So
Yeah.
that is unfortunate, but like you say, we see it more and more every day with
Mm-hmm.
people not knowing what to do with their resume. We even had the conversation,
Yeah.
right before we got on here. Do we take some things off of our resume
Right.
because the job doesn't call for it? And I've heard that as well.
Mm-hmm.
That, but so then my question is, you've gone through all of this extra effort, energy to earn your degrees, your certifications, and get these certain skills and abilities.
Years of
Uh,
experience.
exactly, years of experience, and then you take that away from your resume.
Mm-hmm.
Then are you really presenting yourself, as who you really are?
Right.
And so I go back to one of the early podcasts we did. It's, you know square peg in a round hole.
Hmm.
You trim off all those edges that people don't want, and then you fit into that round hole perfectly. But
But
is that
then,
who you really are?
is that who you really are? And does that mitigate you from being like an outstanding candidate to just
Right.
an average mediocre candidate
Yeah.
because you've stripped all that stuff, all that rest of the stuff off? And then,
Right.
there's the questions about resume formats. There's at
Yeah.
least a half a dozen formats that are out there. And then it's whether it's, chronological or is it skill based, and
Right.
you
Yeah.
know, what is that employer looking for? What format are they looking for? And oftentimes these companies or entities won't disclose the preferred format. It's a
Right.
guessing game.
Yeah.
So, you could refer me for a position and I could have everything that you're looking for, and I don't even meet it. You get past that screening phase because, there's too much experience on there.
Right. Yeah.
If you're looking for a leader or supervisor or manager and they want 10 plus years of experience and you've got 20, is that too much experience?
Right. Yeah.
It's like, well, what are they hiring this person for? And that's a valid question. Why is this person interviewing or wanting this job? That's a great question. Ask them.
Right. Right.
Maybe if it's a step down, or especially for a person that's highly qualified that just maybe wants kind of like a mid-level position. Why do they want it that mid-level or low-level position? Maybe they're tired of leading and managing. Maybe they've had their
Right.
fun with that, and maybe there's an underlying medical condition where they are
Right.
not
Yep.
able, or they just don't want the stress of that level of position, or they just want to do something great for a company because that's what they love to do, and they want
Right.
to get back to their really their true passion, you know.
Yeah,
And I
but
know you.
well, I was going to say, I think you said that one of the key phrases though is a lot of times they don't get to that point. They don't get
Mhm.
to that interview phase, so where
Right,
those questions can be asked. And
right.
again, so those potential candidates out there are not even offered the opportunity to even explain
Yeah, to even
themselves
voice
or their
themselves.
resume.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I think that's where some organizations are missing out
Hmm.
on great candidates because
Hmm.
they have all of these parameters in place, and if they don't meet these certain criterias, then they never get past that screening phase or that
Yeah.
first level. And so that's again unfortunate that you could have a diamond in the rough and not even know it because
Hmm.
they never get to that point. So
Yeah,
it's
or even just have a diamond, and
right.
you just don't see it. You think it's a rock. It's just a rock on the side of the road, and
Right.
it's like that's a diamond.
Yeah.
Why didn't you grab them while you could? And
Right.
it still just baffles me how there's still some some chatter out there about there not being enough qualified
Right.
candidates.
Yep.
And there absolutely is. I talk to
Yep.
people almost every day. There are highly qualified candidates that are being overlooked every
Right.
day.
All
People
the
that have put
time.
in hundreds, if not thousands of job submissions and have maybe gotten one or two interviews and still
Right.
not gotten offered a position. How is that possible? You
Yep.
know, I agree. The person that's submitting to these positions needs to be able to articulate themselves verbally, for in case of an interview, or even written in the case of the resume. However, there are many people that do that very well, and they're still being
Right.
overlooked.
Yep.
They're being dismissed, and I'm not even going to say overlooked. I'm going to say dismissed.
Right.
Do you think that individual's going to be too expensive? Well, ask
Yep.
them. Maybe they're okay with that. Maybe they've made their millions and they're just wanting to stay busy. Maybe they're retired CEO and they just want to contribute back and develop more people. You know,
Right.
I mean, they've got to start asking these questions, because when I see articles and forums out there where people have applied to 300 or 400 jobs and not gotten an interview, that
Right.
disturbs me,
Right.
especially when they're very qualified or highly qualified. You know.
Right. No, and I think that as you say that is a concern for a lot of people, and like you say, we talk to people all the time about what do they need to do
Mhm.
to be able to at least get an interview or to for their resume to stand out and
Mhm.
to finally get through the screening process because every organization is different on
Mhm.
what their expectations are for your resume for your formatting, your what to put in there, what not to put in there. So it is a challenge for a lot of people, and it's concerning to us and concerning to them that they don't know where to go. And you, like you said, there's still evidence, like you say, articles of people that have applied for hundreds of positions and still not being able to get a one interview, two interviews,
Mhm.
and still
And
not.
these people have wonderful track records. I'm not talking about the
Absolutely,
people that are
yes,
problem children. These are highly qualified,
right,
wonderful
right,
professionals that are
right,
extremely adept at what they do and what they can do, and how much and how their experience really transfers over many different
right.
skill levels.
Yep,
It's like they can apply for multiple types of positions because they have that breadth and depth of experience
yep,
deliberately. It's not
right,
by accident. And it's just it really does frustrate me um, when I see in these forums that people are concerned that, well, if I've applied for that job this many times and I keep getting passed up, they've already picked someone. They're just going through the motions.
right,
And that's a concern. And the other concern is when they bring in people that are underqualified at the same level as someone who's highly qualified and reward them at the same level. Or actually,
right,
I should
right,
say, diminish the equity and value of that person that's highly qualified to be the same. So a person can have a master's degree, they've got 10 years of experience, and here comes someone with a high school diploma and 1 year of experience, and they bring them in at the same level,
right,
like
right,
like a senior trainer.
right,
And it's like, how is that possible? What happened, to selecting the best candidate
right,
for the
right.
position?
But and that is a reality, that's what you know people will say that exact thing, that yeah, that person has this 10 years, had a master's degree, but this person comes in with this higher caliber of experience. I mean, it goes back to, yeah, I've been a trainer, I've been a facilitator, but I've been training one person for
Yeah,
the past 10 years, where this
right.
other person, even though they've only been doing it for a year or two, they've trained 1,000 people, 2,000
Right.
people. So it still comes down to that person on that other side's perception of
Right.
that person's skills and ability, the impact they're having. So some of those things are still, again, subject to that personal opinion, that
Yeah.
person's experience level
Mhm.
in whatever that person's doing. Like you said, they could be a adjunct professor, they could be teaching classes, but then that doesn't relate to maybe corporate training. So that those are still some of those subjective, positions people are in, to say that, to me, that doesn't, it's not the same as the other. And so it
And that
still
brings us
comes.
right back to that question. Are
Right.
you equipped to see the value in others?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So we've got a couple minutes left. So
Yeah, yeah, and again, this is, we could go on and on about this conversation, because it is a concern, for not only you and me, but for a lot of people, because it's, organizations talk about not having qualified people, and there is a large pool of qualified people or candidates to, be able to perform well in those organizations, but if they're not given an opportunity or a chance to show that, demonstrate that, then they'll keep looking for that so-called ideal candidate that they think they have, that they think they need,
yeah.
when there's, again, a large amount of people out there with skills, abilities, education, certifications,
Mhm.
experience, background, knowledge, and they're just being overlooked. So um, my hope is that we come to a place where, again, we're looking at for that best candidate, and that
Mhm.
person that shows up would, have that ability to articulate it, have
Mhm.
shows on the resume, and then get in there and be able to demonstrate, what they're capable of. And I've had conversations, with people on the other side of that are, been in a position for a lot of years, and it's not until recently that they're like, well, if I would have known this years ago, I would have started looking at people with this type of
Right,
background. and
right.
and again, they've been in this, narrow-minded approach
Mhm.
of what a good candidate is, and it's not until recently that they see the value. So,
Yeah. And a couple last little points I want to bring up. I've heard I've read and researched that some of the disqualifiers are there's too many pages in the resume.
all right, yeah,
whether it's bloat or act, whether it's quote air quotes bloat, I won't even look at it. I mean, I've seen professionals state this online. If it's more than 2 pages or 4 pages or one page,
Right.
or I won't even look at it. How does a highly qualified person with decades of experience, with years of experience, and all these qualifications and certifications narrow that down into 1 or 2 pages? It's extremely
Right.
difficult. And then the other reason I've heard is there's too many resumes and I don't have the time to look at all of them.
Right. Yeah.
It's like it. I'm a fast reader. I can skim a resume in about 30 seconds and tell you whether this person deserves a chance or not. To be put in the further review pile.
Right.
And it's and to say that, well, I don't have time to look at them. There's software out there that does a lot of this. So make sure your
Right.
algorithms are robust enough so you're not missing these people.
Yeah.
So, to me, the time excuse is just that's an excuse because that's part of your job, to review resumes or review personnel files or review candidates and
Right.
interview them, and and there is a challenge with that because like to your point, maybe you do have 250 highly qualified candidates. What's the distinguish?
Right.
What's the thing that's going to separate them to get it down to 50 candidates, to 5 candidates, to 3 candidates out of those
Right.
250 that are all equal? And that happens more internally when there's a lot of internal competition. So,
Right.
there are challenges, but I'm going to end with this. Are you equipped to see the value in others?
Well, Dave, like I said, we could go on and on about this because
Mhm.
again, it is a concerning topic. But we'll end it with that because I think you did just summarize it greatly. Again, back to our title: Are you equipped to see the value in others? And so that does take some ownership if
Mhm.
you're that person, like you say, that's required to look at resumes or
Mhm.
required to screen people. That part of your responsibility is to make sure you're giving it 100%.
Mhm.
um and time can't be the excuse, or
Mhm.
so with that, I'll just end it with that.
Yeah.
Like I say, so thanks for that summary. So thanks for tuning in to this episode. And again, if there's topics, things that you want to hear about or comments, please, hopefully we'll get some, feedback or comments on this topic because, again, hopefully we can get to a point where we will improve those odds for those people
Right.
out there with the skills and abilities to do those things. So thanks for tuning in to this episode. And like I said, if you're enjoying this, share it with a friend, a colleague that might need this type of information. Again, me and Dave love doing this. So just keep feeding other people, and hopefully we can get to a point where we've got a huge audience, a lot of comments, a lot of questions, a lot of discussion. So,
Mhm.
with that, we want you to continue being your not so ordinary you.